Good day, everyone, and a warm welcome to our monthly Shadow Match System Support webinar. It's great that you can join us, and I'm sure more people will join during the course of the next hour. So as you know, this is the first Wednesday of the month. It's the system webinar. It's specifically aimed at all our Shadow Match users. We've got this Shadow Match user in mind when we decide about the content of this webinar. And it's really to help you to navigate the system and to understand how to use the various functionalities that Shadow Match offers. So please, if you know of someone that can't join today, or you know of one of your clients, I see some of our consultants and associates are also online. If you know of your clients that cannot join today, please, after today, share the recording with them. We would like all the users to make optimal use of all the functionalities on the system. As you all know, my name's Lizette. I'll be the host and also co-presenter today. And I'm going to shortly then hand to Suzanne Conradi. She's the presenter of this webinar, and she's going to take you through a few introductory comments before we then dive into the specific system functionalities that we would like to share with you this afternoon. As always, your microphone is currently in the forced mute setting. It's just to allow the presenters to present. And because it's the webinar specifically for system users, consultants, and associates, towards the end of our webinar, I will enable the setting for you to unmute your microphone. And then please feel free to take part in a discussion, to ask your questions, or to just share some success stories, should you have any. Great. I think from my side, that's all that's important for now. Suzanne, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lizette. Good day, everyone. A warm welcome. It's the first Wednesday of the month, so we're excited to have you with us for the System Navigation and Support webinar. As Lizette rightly said, the session is for you, so we hope you enjoyed today's content. Let me show you what we're going to discuss today. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Let's open this up. Okay, so today we'll first just have a quick look at the Shadow Match newsletter and why is that something that's of value to you as the audience of this webinar. Then we'll take it back to basics again to start with the very foundation of what does Shadow Match do? So an overview of what the Shadow Match system does, a very quick view of that. And then the main content of today is we'll be focusing on specific business applications. So we'll be focusing on redeployment for optimal success, succession planning, leadership development, and employee engagement. So for this main content, Lizette and I will co-present. Lizette will take you through the theory behind this and the principles regarding these aspects. And then I'll take you through the practical steps on the system. What do you practically do and how do you use the functionalities? So at each topic, we'll have that dual part, the theory with the practical element. But let's take a quick look at that first topic, just the newsletter. So we send out a newsletter to all of our system users every second month. And the newsletter is obviously value with you in mind. We write this with you in mind. There's some great opportunities in it. So I don't want you to miss the value and the opportunities. So that's why I'm just sharing it with you again. So you will have it in your inbox as a system user. But if you might have missed it, you can always go to our .com website. So that's shadowmatch.com. And under the resources tab in the menu, the very bottom one is newsletters, and then you can see all of the newsletters that were published in the last few years. The one we are focusing on today is just the one that went out last month. So in this newsletter, you'll see there's an opportunity for you to win. So there's an opportunity to win a great voucher if you complete the quiz. So this was the winner of the previous newsletter's quiz. And if you want to have an opportunity to be the winner this time, all you need to do is simply click on the quiz and it takes you to the questions. The questions are all about Shadow Match, fun questions just for you to understand the system. We focus on different aspects of the system just for you to get comfortable with them. So please don't miss this opportunity. Have a look at that quiz. But there's obviously a lot of other content in the newsletter. So you're welcome to go and read this after the session. I just want to scroll down and show you one very, very valuable thing that was discussed here. is we did a big data analysis on some data on the system. So it was the entire research project. And this is sharing some of the findings. It's very interesting. It's amazing content. So please go and take the time to read that and learn with us and see how amazing the data can be if you actually integrate it and look at a wider perspective, the data of the society or the data of multiple individuals. So yeah, enjoy the newsletter, and you'll have the next newsletter in your inbox when it goes out. This was the August one that went out. Okay, so that's our newsletter. Now let's get to our main content. The perfect introduction to this session is this short little video that I want to show you. So the video focuses on what Shadowmatch does. It's a quick overview of what Shadowmatch does. You'll see this is the foundation for our discussion, and then in our discussion, we'll focus on in specific applications of the system. So let me go to the video. Let's open it up and play. Just gonna put my sound on. Great.
Shadowmatch measures patterns in behavior, also referred to as habits. Habits define who we are, how we work, how we learn, and how we relate to others. The Shadowmatch results are used in various fields to optimize the success of individuals. Shadowmatch has applications for business, learning institutions, sport, coaching, teams, and individuals. Businesses use Shadowmatch for successful placement, development, succession planning, employee engagement, and team optimization. Shadowmatch helps learning institutions ensure student success by comparing the habits of students to successful students in the same field of study. It provides development programs, study guideline, and career guideline reports. In sport, the team application, personal development, as well as coaching application are used successfully. Shadowmatch helps teams understand their behavior and help them reach optimal success. The standalone, automated coaching platform empowers coaches and professionals with content to coach successfully and change individuals' lives through fulfillment, career, study, relationship, and personal development coaching. Shadowmatch empowers individuals with knowledge about themselves and equips them to make career decisions, learn optimally, develop personally, and manage their relationships through the Shadowmatch reports. Shadowmatch ensures success for all.
Okay, so that's the perfect introduction for today's discussion. As you saw, it was a quick overview of the entire picture. What does Shadowmatch do for various organizations, academic institutions, individuals, sports teams, etc.? Today, we'll be taking a focused view at the business applications, and in that business application, very specific applications of this. Now, typically, or the standard Shadowmatch user in the audience today, we're sure you're quite comfortable with the normal usage of the system, normal personal development of individuals, or using it for recruitment. So your standard or your main first applications that you would get comfortable with. So we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus and zone in on these 4 applications. So that's redeployment for optimal success, the succession planning, leadership development, and employee engagement. So for this, as we said, we'll do theory and the system application. When we go to the system, I'm using a fictitious file with fictitious data, but it's the live system. You'll be able to do everything I do on your side with your own employee data. So let's jump in. Our first topic would then be the redeployment for optimal success. Now, this forms part of the optimal placement usage of the system, but placement is so much more than just recruitment for a specific role. So Lizette, would you please elaborate and tell us more about redeployment for optimal success when using Shadowmatch?
Right, so let me share my screen. So if we look at redeployment for optimal success, as Suzanne rightly said, keep in mind that optimal placement links to your recruitment. But if we talk about redeployment for optimal success, we are talking about an individual that's already employed in your organization, and they are not performing successfully. So they are not your top performer. They might be struggling in their role, but keep in mind, dear participant, that these individuals have been in your organization for some time. So they've got the knowledge, they know your product, they know your service, they know the culture, they're part of the culture, they're part of the business engine. So you would rather not lose this individual to your competition. You would rather like to try and redeploy this individual into another role in the organization where it ensures success for the individual, but also ensures success for the specific department and the business. So how do you use Shadow Match for redeployment? Firstly, it will be important to make sure that you've got benchmarks for all the roles in your organization, the roles or the jobs, however you refer to it. So make sure that you've got a benchmark of successful people doing a specific job, and that will then entail all the jobs in your organization. What you do then next is you ensure that all your employees have Shadow Match results on the system. Because what you would like to do is you would like to take the employee that is not successful in their current role and multi-match the individual so that this Shadow Match system compares the individual to all the benchmarks in your organization. And by doing that, the system will then show you where can this individual be redeployed for optimal success. So Suzanne will show us live on the system how this multi-match functionality and this redeployment for optimal success is done. Thanks, Suzanne.
Okay, thank you, Lizette. So if we take a look at redeployment for optimal success, what is the practical steps on the system? So the first element we need to have in place is a benchmark for each of the roles or jobs in our organization. Now, on Shadow Match, you create your organization's organogram or structure by creating the specific roles that you have in your organization, creating a file for each of them. So you would have your structure, and then to create a benchmark, all you need to do is you need to invite the specific individuals to complete the worksheet. So you would go to the role applicable. For today's scenario, I'm going to use customer support as an example. And then outside of the Shadow Match system, I now identify the top performers in this specific role. As specific as possible, I identify the individuals that are currently meeting my performance targets and doing this job well. So outside of the system, I identify them, and now I need to invite them to complete the Shadow Match worksheet. If I want to make them part of the Shadow Match benchmark, all I do is when I send them an invite by clicking on Send Invites, I would then mark them as a benchmark individual. So when I click this option here, Send Invites to Individuals, I would then complete the individual's detail here. And on this drop-down list, I simply mark them as a benchmark individual. They would receive exactly the same worksheet as an applicant or employee. It's always the same worksheet. But now I've told the system, this is a benchmark individual in this file. If I didn't do this before sending out the worksheet invitation, no problem. I can always mark an individual as a benchmark individual. So we call it the type on the system. So you can change the type of the individuals between benchmark, employee, applicant at any time. But let's say the worksheet invitations went out to my group I identified as top performers in the role. They complete the Shadow Match worksheet, and now because I've marked them as benchmark individuals, they would automatically populate here at the bottom of my benchmark. So in my left main menu, I click on Shadow Match benchmark, and here I would see the list of individuals that I've identified as top performers in this role. Now, the good news is the system would then do the stats check behind this to see, can it find a congruent enough pattern between these unique habits to have a stable benchmark? So this indicator here would help me and guide me to say, is the grouping of individuals a good representation of what are the successful specific combination of habits to be successful in this specific role? So I'll guide the system. It will either be orange or green here if it's ready to use. Otherwise, the system will prompt me to exclude certain individuals from this calculation just to make sure it's sound and valid. And then once that's in place, this gray here at the top, the score you see on the page would represent the context for me. So this is my map to my context to understanding what are the specific behaviors that are functional towards success in this specific role. Okay, so that's creating a benchmark. You would do this for each role. So as I said, what's the first thing that needs to be in place? The benchmarks for each specific role. So in each role, you would do this, make sure you've identified the individual, they only complete the worksheet, and you just tell the system, please use this data in my benchmark. Now your benchmarks are sorted on the file. The second step is you need to make sure all of your employees have completed the Shadow Match worksheet. So obviously, we'd also click on send invites and make sure they all complete the worksheet. And then once they've completed the worksheet, their results will populate here, either an applicant or employee, depending on what was the type you've selected. Now, for today's discussion for the redeployment for optimal success, I want to show you what it looks like if an individual is matched against a role and you can see it's not the optimal role for them. So here I'm using this individual here, Jillian, this is a fictitious individual. And if we now compare her unique habits, so that's the red and the orange, her own shadow match results to the benchmark of that specific file, so the customer support role, we can see what is the context match. So what is going to be expected of her behaviorally? How do the optimal habits for success, how do they operate? And how does the individual's natural behavioral preferences or habits look? And what is the comparison with this? As you know, the matching report will give you the detail in this, but we can see there's a bottom line score here to say, currently, this isn't the optimal position for her. So if we want to find an optimal position in our organization for her, we want to redeploy her into a role where she can optimally function towards success. We use the multi-match function. So you find it in your bottom row of buttons here at the bottom. If you see a comparison of an individual against the benchmark, you click on multi-match, and now the system opens up the following screen. This is now in comparing this specific individual against all of the other benchmarks on your system. So you've created all of the benchmarks for the different roles. And now by clicking on multi-match, it allows you to see the bigger picture, to say, okay, compared to customer support, where I'm currently considering the individual or where she is employed, the match isn't so great. But if I look at another benchmark, for instance, at sales, a different role, I now compare that same individual with exactly the same habits, her preference of how she approaches her environment, compared to a different context, a different benchmark. Now, currently, you can see the chances of that individual performing optimally and being successful in this role is so much higher. So the multi-match functionality allows me to do this, to optimally redeploy and find the perfect position for each of my individuals in my organization to say, great, here we can see the chances of success is the highest. Now, obviously, once we do this, we would then develop the individual in this specific area to say, great, okay, now that you are in this specific role, what is our journey of development for you, and to make sure you can practically go into this position. So then it's linked to our practical steps behind this. But now we can see with the multi-match functionality, what is the scope of redeployment and the possible roles. And you can create your entire context by creating those specific roles and creating the redeployment landscape. Great, so that's redeployment for optimal success. Now, the next function would focus on your succession planning. This also links to placement, but this is then finding the succession planning mechanism for your individuals in your organization. I'm going to stop to share my screen, and I'm going to ask Lizette, please share with us the theory behind succession planning when using the Shadow Match system.
Great. Let me share my screen. So if we look at succession planning, it's important to know that succession planning is mostly where we would like to replace a manager or a senior executive or even a business owner that's close to retirement or that might be selling the business. So that's where we're looking at a successor that's going to fill the shoes of somebody in a more senior position. So the important step always is to start with your benchmark. So for succession planning, it will be important to create benchmarks for the management, the senior executives, and if applicable, for the business owners. So these will be your management, senior executive, and business owners where you look at finding successors. Now, once you've created these benchmarks, you then search your own shadow match database. So remember, that's why it's important to get the data of all your employees on the system, because the moment you now start looking for a successor for a specific role, and it might be a specialist role as well, but I think traditionally it's more with regards to your management and your senior executives where you look at succession planning. And I know there are other roles, so the same rule will apply. So you then create your benchmark, and then you search your shadow match database. That's then your database of your individuals in your company. We refer to this as the reverse multi-match, and Suzanne will demonstrate this on the system. Now, as soon as you've taken the benchmark, you've done a reverse multi-match. In other words, the system took the benchmark, searched your shadow match database to find individuals with similar habits to those of your successful managers or senior executives, or the role that you have then chosen where you are looking for a successor. You then look at the list and you decide, this is the one or maybe two individuals that we would like to develop into this role, and that will be the perfect individual to act or to be the successor for the manager or the executive or the director or whatever it might be. Now, once you've decided on that individual, development then starts to take place. And I know in most situations there's a year or a couple of months shadowing. And in that time of shadowing this person whose footsteps this person will now follow in and whose role and shoes this person will fill, the development is then threefold. So whilst this person is being developed for the role, firstly, they need to obviously gain the knowledge of how do I act as a manager? What are the things I need to know in terms of the knowledge and the content of this new role that I'm going to be fulfilling? Secondly, they need to be trained on the technical side, the skills necessary for this job. And then the third part of the development is then the habits. So once you've identified the individual by doing your reverse multi-match, you will then start to use the shadow match system to see what are the habits that need to be developed for this individual to be successful in this new role that they will fulfill once this person that they are succeeding steps out of the role. So thank you, Suzanne. You can show us then the reverse multi-match on the system.
Okay, so for the reverse multi-match on the shadow match system, we need a few things in place. Firstly, we need the benchmarks for each of or for the role we are considering to do the succession planning in. So on my structure, I have a file called Customer Support Supervisors. So in this role specifically, we've identified the individuals that are currently performing in this specific role. We've marked them as benchmark individuals, and they're contributing to our benchmark. So we have the context map of what is this role, this senior role we want to develop towards in our succession planning game plan. What does the combination of specific habits that are functional towards success look like? So we have the first element in place. We have our benchmark of the specific role. For the reverse multi-match, I go directly to a benchmark. So I click, as you've seen, on the shadow match benchmark in my left main menu. And now I click on the multi-match button here at the top. If I click on multi-match, it would now bring up a list of individuals in my database compared to this specific benchmark. So the score I will see here is the individual's unique behavioral preferences compared to that specific benchmark I'm considering, and what is the alignment or the chances of that individual also being successful in that specific context. Now, my reverse multi-match, I can filter here. I can choose in a specific file. So maybe just select in a specific business division, or if I want to select company-wide, it depends on the mandate of your succession planning. How wide is the search of individuals going on the system? You can do just as you need by selecting everybody. This list at the bottom would include everybody in your database, all individuals compared to that specific benchmark. In this case, our supervisor benchmark, the one we want to get our next successor developed towards. Now we can see there's a few very great matches to this, where we see the individual already has a close alignment to what is going to be expected of them behaviorally in this role. So if we now identify, let's say the top individual here, Christopher Locke, and we say, okay, what would be our next step? We've decided on Christopher. He's one of our potential individuals we're going to do the succession planning with. Now we need that final step of understanding the development journey. As I said, explained, the development would happen outside the system for the practical things, how to have management discussions and all of those things that need to be in place. But the shadow match system guides your behavioral or your habit development to say, but which of the habits would make sense for this individual to make a bit fitter for them to be successful in that role. So I go to the screen and then I click on this button here at the bottom, request PDP. And now it would open up a view of all of the potential development programs that we can activate for this individual. So there would be 20 different development programs, each focusing on a specific habit used in the shadow match system. But then you would see some of them would specifically be recommended. So the ones that are highlighted like this, the system says specifically for this role, Christopher Locke, stepping into the role of a customer support supervisor. If you want to make the succession planning journey complete and make sure the development is holistic and empowers this individual to fulfill that specific role, the system would guide you to say it would make sense. Either innovation or responsiveness in this specific scenario would be a habit that would equip this individual to step up to the challenges of that role. So you see it specifically tailors your development journey based on that unique individual's habits compared to the demands in that specific role. So it's not a generic approach to say you would always do this specific approach. It really focuses it on this specific individual's development needs to help them for the challenges of this specific role. And then you can activate this program and embark on that journey of development. The programs are broken up into phases and the experiential outcomes-based learning programs. So in each phase, the individual would complete a specific task linked to that habit. And by completing all of these phases, they systematically learn that behavioral pattern so that pathway in the brain becomes fitter and fitter, strongly embedded until that habit is developed to a stronger extent, helping them to rise to the challenges of that environment. Great, so that would be your development journey. We're looking at succession planning on the system. Now, the next topic we would focus on today is the leadership development in shadow match. Now, this is once again focusing specifically on leadership development, a very specific type of development. Lizette, please tell us more about how the system would support the leadership development when looking at shadow match.
Great. So if we look at leadership development, a few important comments before we look at the theory behind the leadership development. Dear audience, I think it's important to remember that a leader and a manager, those two people are not necessarily the same people. It's not necessarily the same person. You might have very great leaders in your organization, but they are not in management roles. And you might have managers that are not good leaders. And I think we've all experienced this. So if we focus on leadership development, it's not about management development. That's more where you would look at your succession planning. But the leadership development is to say, I would like to identify leaders in my organization, and I would like to develop more leaders that can rise to the occasion. So how do we do this? We start again by creating a benchmark of successful leaders. Now, this can be leaders at all levels of seniority in the organization. There might be an excellent leader that's currently not in a management role. They might just be one of your entry-level workers, but in their group or in their team or amongst their peers, that person is an excellent leader. They show excellent and exceptional leadership qualities. That would also be someone that you identify to include in your leadership benchmark. So please, an important comment and a note to make that the leadership benchmark includes all successful leaders that are currently successful leaders in your organization. So once you've created this benchmark of successful leaders, because remember our mandate here is to find people in my organization that have the same behavioral patterns as these successful leaders, and we would like to develop them so that they can take a leadership role in the future. So we've got the benchmark. Now you search your shadow match database. In other words, you search your group of individuals and the results that you have on the system of your organization. That's your reverse multi-match. Or alternatively, you take an individual's results and you match and compare that individual to your successful leadership benchmark. So you might have identified an individual that you say, maybe we should develop this person into a leadership role, or to act as a leader in a specific capacity. Let's see how this individual compares to that benchmark. So once you've got your benchmark, you can do one of two things. You can search your database to find people that have the same habits as the already successful leaders, or you can take an individual and compare that individual to your benchmark of successful leaders. Now, once you've done this, if you've done the reverse search and you decide on the individuals that you would like to develop in terms of their leadership capacity, then you do the following. Firstly, these individuals that you've identified, you do the leadership personal development program, the leadership PDP, with each of these individuals. Once they've completed the leadership development program, then they do the second development, and that would be career development. ShadowMatch offers a career report, so you can merely request a career report for that individual, and they can read through the report. You can assign them to an internal mentor, or you can make use of one of the ShadowMatch coaches to take that individual through a career coaching program. And then once they've done the leadership PDP, as well as the career development program guided by the career report, they can then redo ShadowMatch. And then what you do, the match of this individual against the successful leader benchmark, you then identify the habit where the individual has the biggest difference compared to the benchmark. And in that habit, you then start with a PDP, a personal development program on that specific habit. So let's see how that plays out on the system.
Okay, when focusing on leadership identification on the ShadowMatch system, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a benchmark of our successful leaders. So outside of the system, we identify all of the successful leaders within our organization in all of the different roles and levels. We ask them to complete the ShadowMatch worksheet. If they have completed the ShadowMatch worksheet already, we can just group all of their data together. So how would we do this? We would create a file and we call it successful leaders, that we know this is what we're referring to. So our successful leaders, and then all of the individuals that we have identified as actual successful leaders practically in our organization. We combine the results in the benchmark, and we have our benchmark in place showing us what is the current context of the specific behavioral combinations of habits that are functional towards success as successful leaders in our organization. So that's our first element we need in place. Now we can compare any individual against this benchmark, any individual in this file marked as an employee or applicant, we will be able to compare it. But if you want to see the entire picture to see, okay, all of the individuals compared to this benchmark, we can once again use the reverse multi-match option. So we are on the benchmark and we then click on multi-match here. And now we would find a list of individuals that would be compared to this specific benchmark to say, okay, what are the chances of this individual also being an effective leader in our organization? So in this case, we decided on, great, Patricia, she looks like a very good match. She already has the very close alignment to this, already similar habits and behavioral patterns in her natural preferences. So the chances of her also being a successful leader in our organization is very high. It's almost 100% chance. It's a 10 out of 10 chance here. So now we can see that specific individual compared to that benchmark. And we now see, okay, great. We can see a great alignment if we look at her individual preferences against the benchmark. Now, in the introduction, you would have heard, okay, now we do specific things. Now we need to go and activate the leadership PDP. So we're not going to activate a different program, but we're still going to go to the same button. We're going to go to our request PDP button. Now we want to start developing this potential successful leader in our organization. So we want to equip them with the knowledge and the skills and everything they need. And one of those elements is doing that leadership personal development program. So we click on request PDP. And now from our list of PDPs, we would then click on the leadership option and we would then activate it. If you click on it, you can activate it and choose the options applicable for this specific individual in this journey. Should it be screen-based? Should it be paper-based? You can do all of the steps there, but on this screen, you request that leadership development program. Now, the next element in the development journey for the new successful leader in our organization is the career report. So you could find this if you go to the individual. Let's go back to that view there. On this screen, you would find the career report here in the bottom row of options. There's a career report where you can select it here. You can also find it here in your left option here underneath the individual's actions, you would find a career report. Now, what is the career report? I've prepared a little example report for us just that you can see the different sections in this. The career report is a report that helps the individual with the specific elements that need to be in place in their career makeup. So it's based on the individual's unique habits. That's the informing data that helps this report or that writes this report to say this individual's unique habits, their preference and how they approach the environment. What are the specific career elements that help them for the optimal career? So if the potential leader now sees it and understands in my role as a successful leader or in the organization, where is my current focus on things, as you see when we go to the elements, it equips them to be an optimal leader in this organization. So let's just take a quick view through the report. So you'll see there's elements. It's an explanation of how to read this report. It's very nice and interactive, this report. A lot of videos in the report, nice and interactive graph. So in each section, there would, for instance, be a video explaining that section. So very nice interactive report, explaining this individual, how do you read your report? Then the first section here is in the future world of work in Industry 4.0, what can they expect? So make sure this is a sustainable journey, that the role and the journey of leadership that you're developing is sustainable for the future. So it gives them that landscape there of where they would fit in the Industry 4.0 landscape. And then specific sections like the broad focus of your career. So there's a nice video explaining this element, the detail for the individual, and you see there the score, for instance, in what is their balance between working with people, working with objects and tasks, working with ideas. So if the individual is now informed of this, understanding in their leadership journey, how do I manage this and balance this and make sure I keep this in mind, the report will guide them. Great. And then a lot of other great content here, how the balance between a stable and a dynamic content of your career. What should that be? A nice video, the explanation, and their specific unique balance point. And as you know, in Shadow Match, there's no good or bad or right or wrong. This would always be the specific individual's unique preference for this. And the report helps them to understand that and say, okay, what would optimally work with that, my specific preference, my practical and theoretical career content, the complexity index of my career, and then specific career tips for me to keep in mind if I know my specific strongest habits and softer habits, what are the things I should make sure is definitely in place, and what are the elements I should rather steer clear of. So specific tips for me in my career journey. So this can also be linked to a complete career coaching journey, as Z referred to this, where you can do career coaching, where a Shadow Match coach takes you through the entire process, understanding these elements and working through your career journey if it needs to go to the next level. But on the system, you can request that career report. And then the last element in our development of our potential successful leader is for them to then redo Shadow Match. So after 11 months has passed since their previous worksheet, they would redo Shadow Match, and then you would do a PDP on their softest habits. So you would go to the result. And now scenario, we're looking at Patricia, and now we would see, okay, out of all of her habits, which habit is the softest? And we can see for this individual, it's individual inclination. And now we would go and activate that specific development program. So once again, we go to the request PDP button, and then we would choose the specific habit. In her case, it was individual inclination. We would select that program and activate it to complete the next phase of the development journey in our potential successful leader in the organization. Okay, so that concludes our leadership development. Now, the last topic for today is employee engagement. So specifically focusing on that aspect and understanding how the Shadow Match system supports you in employee engagement within your organization. Lizette, please tell us more.
Great. So let's look at employee engagement and the theory behind how do we use Shadow Match as a system to encourage the engagement of employees in the working environment. So I'm going to share my screen. So if we look at employee engagement, the first thing we do and how do we apply and use Shadow Match with regards to employee engagement is firstly, we teach the manager to use the strongest habits of each employee for tasks. So let me explain. So if I, as the manager of my division, have insight into the habits, the results of all my employees, I can then allocate roles and responsibilities according to the strongest habits of each of the employees in my department or division. So if I, for example, know that Suzanne's strongest habits are around the people habits, altruism, people positive, and conflict handling, for example, I would then allocate roles and responsibilities that are related to customer service, customer engagement, organizing social events for the team, everything people related that's on our task list as a division. I will then allocate those roles and responsibilities to Suzanne because her strongest habits are the people habits. If one of my employees have strong habits on problem solving and simplification, tasks and things that come across our desk that are challenges and problems to be solved, I will then allocate those tasks to the individuals with the highest and the strongest habits on problem solving and simplification, because that's their natural patterns. Now that's allocating the tasks to the individuals where their habits are the strongest. The second thing we do is we help the manager to talk the language of the strongest habit of the employee. Now, this is different to point number one. Point number one is I actually allocate the task to the individual with the strongest habit related to that task. But now, as the manager, I also talk the language of the strongest habit of an employee. Another example, if I have a specific challenge that needs to be taken care of in my division, and I know James has a strong habit on propensity to own, James has a strong habit on problem solving as well as simplification, and those are James's 3 strongest habits. Then when I engage into a discussion and when I communicate with James, I would say, James, we've got a challenge at hand. I would like you to take ownership of this challenge and see if you can find a solution that will be the simplest way to explain this to our customers. Now, can you hear? I've said to James, can you take ownership of this problem? Because his strongest habit is propensity to own and problem solving. So immediately James takes ownership. He goes into problem solving mode because he applies his problem solving habit. And I've said, I want to find the simplest solution to explain this to our customers. Now I also activate his simplification habit. So by talking the language of the employee's strongest habits, I now help to activate the behavior for that individual to execute the task. And then lastly, for employee engagement, and this is contrary to what we do normally when we look at development of an employee, we do a personal development program on the strongest habit of the employee, not the habit that is the softest compared to the benchmark, or just if we look at the individual in isolation, not the individual's softest habit. We do a development program on the strongest habit. Why? Because that activates the execution. That makes the employee feel engaged because the strongest habits are the habits that the employee will use to do the daily job, to execute the task, and to achieve success in their role in that specific division. So thanks. Let's have a look at this on the system. How do we actually do this when we look at the practical side of Shadow Match?
When focusing on employee engagement in Shadow Match, you would need to understand the unique habits of a specific individual. So step one is for the manager to understand each of the individuals in their team's unique habits. So on your file, you would find all of the results. So you would just need to give the manager the access to the results. So you can either just email them the report, or if they have system access, they can access the interactive version on the website, on the system. So let's say I'm the manager of the admin team. Now I just need to understand my specific team. So the 7 employees working with me in the team, I need to understand each of their habits. So let's say Fred Flintstone, one of my team members, I want to understand his habits. I would click on Shadow Match results. And now I don't want to look at the comparison. I'm not concerned now at the benchmark versus the individual. I would simply click on the full report here at the bottom. And now I see the individual's unique habits. Now, this is actually an entire interactive report. So if you click on one of the graphs, it would open up the explanation for that specific habit, explain the cutoff points and all of the details. So it's nice and interactive. But you can also download or email the specific report. So on the system, you will see always at the top screen here, you can click on download, then you can download the full report with all of the content or just the graph, depending on what you need. So if the manager doesn't have access to the system, you would simply say download full report and give them the report. So email them the report that they have it on their side. But step one is for the individual to understand this. So they would read that full report to say, okay, now I need to understand the Shadow Match language to link the tasks to that individual's specific, unique, strongest habits. So the example we have here is Fred, and his strongest habit is to simplify and responsiveness. So when giving him tasks, we would focus it on that to say, okay, can you find us a simplified solution to this? Saying, oh, this is so complex, it's chaos, I'm not seeing a clear solution. Fred, will you please find a simplified solution or suggestion for the following problem or the following scenario? So it always focuses that on the strongest habits to make sure it activates that specific individual's unique strongest habits. So that's step one. We equip the manager with the information. So it's purely giving them access to the individual's own Shadow Match result. That entire full report would explain everything. And if I want to understand that strongest habit, I can zone in on that to say, okay, what is simplification? What does it mean? How does it, manifest? And then understand the habit and understand the specific individual. Where does he fall? How strong is his strongest habit? So all of the detail in that report, the manager can then have access to. So they have that in place. Now we need to do the development journey. And now we're going to develop the strongest habit of this individual. So we go to the system. We are on the individual's result here. And then we go to the bottom screen and we click on the request PDP button here. And now we're not going to follow the recommendations. We're not going to think about a benchmark compared to this. We have a specific mandate with employee engagement in mind to say we're focusing this on the specific individual's strongest habit. For this one, we know, okay, it's to simplify. So we would select the simplification PDP program, activate that, and now the development would align to that individual's strongest habit, making that stronger habit even more stronger, but completely engaging the individual with the tasks they're going to be expected, because it's already in the comfortable space of habits where there's that embedded pattern for it. So yeah, we would activate that program specifically, and then obviously you would do this for each individual. Go to their specific result, activate their specific strongest PDP, and keep and activate that employee engagement mindset with the individuals. And now they embark on this great, fantastic journey of development, specifically focused for them, focused on their highest habit. And we saw the results on their personal feedback report. Great, Lizette, that actually concludes the content then for today. I'm going to refer back to you for final comments, or if there were any questions in the chat.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. I'm sure everybody found this insightful. I hope you did. If you did identify something whilst we were presenting and you thought, sure, I would like to know more about this or that with regards to the application on the system, you might have watched a previous webinar, or whilst we were talking, you were thinking of a specific question that you received from a customer. Please feel free to email us to info@shadowmatch.co.za. Let us then work do a little bit of a theory, and as we did today interchangeably, we'll position the theory, we will show you on the system so that you can then go back to your customer, or in your capacity as consultant, you know that what the challenges of your customers are, that you can then go back and say, I've got the solution for you. Let me show you. You're already using ShadowMatch. You've got all the data on the system. This is how you can make use of the data in a valuable way to address the specific challenge that the client might be facing. I think that concludes our session. I am now going to allow for questions, but before I do that, let me just stop the recording so that everybody feels free to ask their question and they are then not part of the recording. So thanks for joining. Don't run away. Allow me to just stop the recording.